classroom, the first thing you're going to do on the first day is introduce yourself to the class. Go ahead and talk with your host teacher about the best way that you should introduce yourself. So they might ask that you call yourself by your last name, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, or you might go by Mr. or Mrs. in your first name. It's up to your host teacher, so go ahead and ask them what you should introduce yourself as. So good morning, class. My name is Miss Sarah, and I am a senior at UT studying psychology and education.
My name is Mr. Mason, and I too am a senior. I study astronomy and physics.
So every week we're going to come here and teach you guys a pretty cool lesson. So when we get here, we want everybody to clear off your desks except for your pencil and your science notebook. So go ahead and take a minute to do that now. Okay, I also want to introduce you to our favorite spirit signal at UT. This is called hook 'em sign. And so every time we say hook 'em, that means that we need your attention. So you should put everything on the table and stop what you're doing, and we want you to turn and say horns and give us the horn sign. So let's practice that. Ready? Hook 'em!
Horns!
All right, let's try it once more with a little more enthusiasm. Ready? Hook 'em!
Horns!
That's better. So anytime we do the hook 'em sign, we need you to stop what you're doing and pay attention to us. All right, so today's lesson is going to be called Mystery Package. Go ahead and write that title at the top of your science notebook page. All right, are you guys ready to be scientists with us today?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
All right.
that was not enough enthusiasm. Let's try that again. Are you ready to be scientists today?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right, so where does science happen?
In a lab or at a university.
Okay, and what do scientists do?
They study stuff.
And where do they go to do that?
Anywhere. Rainforest.
Okay,
Or
that's
lab.
good. So as you probably know, research scientists from the university travel all over the world to do work. We have one group of research scientists that do research in the Arctic, while others explore rainforests, and still others do research on tiny microscopic organisms in the oceans. Science is everywhere, and so that is where scientists go. So one of the first things that scientists do is make observations. They observe things in order to determine properties, and let's see if we can practice using our senses to make observations in order to figure out what is in each of these envelopes. So I have 3 envelopes here, and what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be passing these around, and you're going to be trying to make different observations of what's in these envelopes. So Miss Sarah is going to be passing around the envelopes with different items in them. Think about what you see and hear. Write down some of your observations in your journal. You have 2 minutes to make your observations, and we will be walking around and checking what kind of observations you are making. All right, it looks like everybody is about done. So what did you observe? Sarah's going to be writing down your observations as we go over them.
Yep. I observed like a cylinder,
Okay,
but it has like different ridges.
so it feels like a cylinder with some different ridges.
Yeah.
So we're going to be writing that down, all right? Anybody else? Yeah?
Okay, the shape is circular, and I feel 2 of them in here.
Okay, so one of the envelopes is circular, and there feels like 2 of them. All right, well that was great practice, and now today we brought this package with us from the university.
Ooh.
All right. So we're going to explore like real scientists and try to figure out what this is. This package says it's from KIMP. You may not be able to see it from there, but trust me, that's what it says. The UT post office has never heard of such a place, so they called 911 and had the police K9 unit come screen it for us. They said it was all clear and the package is safe for us to explore. So there's no kind of like explosive material or anything like that. It's all safe. All right, so since it is determined to be safe, we brought it here to get your help to see what it is. All right, so I'm going to open this and see what's in it. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, it looks like it's full of these vials. So what do these vials look like?
Sand art.
Yeah, it looks just like sand art.
Alright, so that was the engage. The engage is just a quick 5-minute introduction to your lesson. It should be something that gets each student thinking about the topic at hand and also is something exciting and catches their attention. So you're going to have an engage for every lesson that you teach here at Outreach. So Mr. Mason has posted the question of the day on the board. It says, how can we identify substances in a mixture? So our goal today is going to be to identify all the substances in our vial. So when we do that, we're going to be looking at the physical properties. Mr. Mason is also going to post a list of different physical properties on the board. So what is a physical property?
Something that describes the object.
Good. So the physical properties are something that describes an object. That's something we can observe. So today we're going to be working together in groups. And I'm going to pass out these things we call job cards. Or Mr. Mason is actually going to pass them out for me. So each person at your table is going to get one job card. Don't look at them yet. I'm passing them out face down. All right. So if you have the blue card, will you raise your hand? All right. Will you read what it says on the blue card?
Principal investigator. I will make sure every group member is involved and has a turn. I will make sure the group completes all parts of the activity.
Very nice. All right. Now everyone raise your hand if you have an orange card. Will you read it for us?
Material manager dash technician. I will gather and return all materials needed. I will make sure the material are used as tools and not toys.
Very good. All right. And if you have a green card, will you raise your hand? All right. Please read your card for us.
Recorder and reporter. I will make sure all data is recorded properly by each member of the group, including myself. I will report my group's finding to the class.
Very nice. And if you have a yellow card, will you raise your hand? All right. Will you please read that for us?
Time/safety manager. I will make sure all safety instructions are followed by each group member. I will make sure the group stays on task.
Very good. So each week we'll have a different job role card. So remember, we're not going to fight over our job roles this week because you'll have a different role next week. So Mr. Mason is now going to pass out our worksheets and our vocabulary sheets. And let's look at our first vocabulary word. Our first word is a mixture. So mixture is when two or more substances are combined and their chemical makeup does not change. So every time we post a definition on the .camp, you need to make sure you're recording it on your vocabulary sheet. So take a few seconds to record that on your vocabulary sheet. So as a teacher, this is a good time to walk around and make sure everybody is recording their definitions on their worksheet. It's also a good time to gauge the language levels of your classroom because you may have a lot of ESL students, so this is a good way to kind of get an idea of what level they're on. So especially important in your first lesson to make sure that you know this. All right, so how many substances is a mixture made out of?
2.
2, great. Does a substance change when it's in a mixture?
No.
No, you're right. Okay, so today when we're looking at our mixtures, I want you to work with your group. Let's look at our data table now on our second worksheet. Mr. Mason's going to put it up on the .camp for us. The first column in our worksheet says physical properties. So we're going to work together to observe physical properties. What senses can we use when we're observing physical properties? Yes?
Feel?
You can feel it. Good idea. Anything else?
Taste it.
Oh, so in science labs, we definitely do not want to taste any of our materials because we don't know what it is and it could be dangerous. Are there any other senses we can use?
Smell?
You can smell it. But we need to remember when we're smelling anything that we don't know what it is, it's important to waft it. So I'm going to demonstrate wafting up here. So you have your vial and you want to smell something. You're going to hold it away from your nose and use your hand to move the scent towards your nose. That way, in case it's a dangerous chemical, you're not inhaling it directly because that could be very dangerous. All right, so we said you could see it, look at it with your eyes. You can feel it and feel what the texture feels like. And you can smell it. But we're definitely not tasting it today. Okay, so we're going to pass out materials now and make sure you're waiting for instructions before you begin. So technicians, can you please come up to the front of the room and we're going to give you your materials. All right, now that you have your materials at your table, principal investigators, you're going to start with the first layer. So you're going to uncap this vial and remove the first layer and put it into the first ice cube tray, labeled number 1 on your desk. Or we'll do the first column together as a class. So what are some difficult physical properties we've talked about?
Something you can observe with your senses.
Right, so a physical property is something you can observe with your senses. Let's look at this first layer in our vial and see what physical properties we can observe. So turn and talk with your group and come up with a few physical properties that this first layer has. I'm going to walk around and make sure everybody's got this. So the principal investigator should be the first one to remove the cap and pour the first layer in the first tray on their ice cube tray. Now replace the clap. Alright, so what are some physical properties of this first layer?
It's white and small.
Very good. Alright, look in your vial now. What's right beneath it? Is it a cotton ball?
Yeah.
Is this a layer?
No.
No. What do you think the cotton ball is used for? Yes.
To separate the different substances.
Great. So as we move on, you're going to have to pull the cotton ball out between each layer. You can put the cotton balls on your paper plate so that we don't make as much of a mess. So you're going to go through your worksheet and pull out one layer at a time and make observations. I want you to be sure you're writing down your physical properties on your worksheet before you pull out the next layer. So we're going to walk around and make sure everybody's doing that properly. Make sure that you are letting everybody in your group take a turn. So every time someone pulls out a layer, you need to pass the vial to the next person. So everyone gets a turn. So as a teacher, now is a good time to walk around and make sure everybody's getting a turn. Some questions that you can ask while you're walking around are, what do you think this layer is? What color is it? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Just ask them about the physical properties and really make sure they're thinking. 1. Make sure you record your observations on your worksheet. Alright, now we're going to rotate and the next person at your table will get to take out the next layer. You're going to use the paper clip to remove the cotton ball and place the cotton ball on your paper plate or your napkin. Now you're going to take turns pouring out each layer and making observations before you move on to the next layer. Make sure everybody gets a turn to pour out a layer. So you should be making observations between each layer before you pour out the next layer. Alright, so now that everybody's finished the first column on your worksheet, recording the physical properties, we're going to make predictions about what you think will happen when we add water to your layers. So your second column says predictions of what will happen in water. I want you to turn and talk with your group and take a minute to make predictions about what you think will happen in water. Now remember, I don't want you to write, it gets wet, because of course it's going to get wet. We need a little bit more information than that. So when you're adding water, you're going to take your pipette and add 2 pipettes of water to each layer. And if your class doesn't know how to use a pipette, this is a good time to demonstrate. So after you add water, I want you to write down your observations in the third column. The third column, you want to make sure you write down detailed observations, more than just it's wet or it's dark. See if there's any changes to the smell, to the texture, stuff like that. You're also going to use your toothpick to mix up the layer. And you want to write down whether or not the substance mixed up or it formed layers. That's something important to write in your observations as well. So go ahead and make your predictions with your group, and as soon as we see that you've made your predictions, we'll give you your cup of water. As you're walking around, some questions that you should ask are, what's happening? What changed? When you stir it, does it look different? When you stop stirring, does it spread out evenly or does it form layers? So now's a good time to walk around and make sure your class is doing everything properly. So this is what it should look like when you're all done pouring out your layers. Once you've made your predictions about what will happen when you add water, we'll come around and pass out your cup of water. You'll now pipette 2 pipettes full of water into each layer. Be sure to record your observations between each layer before you move on to the next. We'll be walking around to make sure that everybody is writing down your observations before moving on. Remember, you will be making and writing down observations between each layer. You won't run through it completely. Once you've added water to each layer, this is what it should look like. Next, students will use toothpicks to stir each layer and observe whether or not it forms layers. Students should use a different toothpick for each layer so that they don't contaminate their different samples. Notice that the magic sand is hydrophobic and it avoids the water. Alright, now we're going to compare the physical properties to our physical properties list to see if we can identify our layers. Mr. Mason's going to put up our physical properties list on the dot cam. So this list was compiled by scientists at UT. It's got some possible layers that could be in our vials, but they aren't necessarily in our vials. So you're going to compare the physical properties you observed with the physical properties on the list and try to identify the substances. Make sure you're working as a group and discussing this with your partners. We're going to walk around now and see if you can guess what each layer is. Alright, were you able to identify each layer?
Yes.
Yes. So what did you get for layer 1?
Yes. Instant snow.
Instant snow. Why did you say it was instant snow?
Because it was white and it was also rough.
Great. So let's go over the rest of the layers. What did you get for layer 2?
Sand.
Awesome. And why did you say it was sand?
Because it kind of looked brownish and it was really, really small.
Good. What about layer 3?
Salt.
Salt. Good. And what about layer 4?
Magic sand.
And layer 5?
That's pepper.
That's pepper. How did you know it was pepper?
It matches the physical property that is described on the board.
It has a pretty strong smell, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
smells very strongly of pepper. So that was the explore part of the lesson. That's the hands-on part of the lesson where the student is getting to explore and understand the lesson on his own. So now we're going to move on to the explain. This is when you need to ask lots of probing questions and you're making sure that the students understand the topic at hand. All right, so let's begin the explain now. Looking at the last column on your worksheet, Now you can see it says homogeneous or heterogeneous. What do you think this can mean? Let's take a look at some examples. So Mr. Mason is going to come over here and make two mixtures for us. One mixture is going to contain oil and water. So he's going to add some water to the oil. What do you notice?
They have 2 layers.
It formed 2 layers.
Ooh.
Oh, okay, so now he's going to make a second mixture where he's going to add sugar to water. And let's see what happens. So first he adds the water. Next he adds the sugar, but we're not going to mix it yet, we're just going to pour it in. Alright, what do you notice? Did it form layers?
No, it went all the way to the bottom.
The bottom. So it is. It formed a layer of sugar at the bottom and a layer of water at the top. So we're going to mix it up here in a minute, but first I want you to turn and talk to your table partners and come up with a prediction about what you think will happen when we shake it. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about this with your groups. All right, what do you think will happen? Do you think it'll mix up?
It will
Yeah.
dissolve.
You think it'll dissolve? All right, so let's try the oil and water mixture first. All right, Mr. Mason is going to shake the oil and water mixture lightly, and then we'll see what happens. What do you notice?
It stayed the same.
So it's still in layers. All right, let's try the sugar mixture now. All right, what did you observe?
It looks a different color.
Looks a different color. Maybe it's cloudier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sugar is dissolving in the water. So these are examples of 2 different types of solutions. Mr. Mason's going to walk around now so that everybody can see the 2 different layers, or the 2 different mixtures. So these are called homo and heterogeneous mixtures. Mr. Mason is going to put the definition of homogeneous and heterogeneous on the board in just a minute. So these are kind of big words. Let's break them down for a second. Homo means the same, and hetero means different. Be sure to fill these in on your worksheets. So this can kind of give us an idea about what each word means. Homogeneous means that 2 substances mix evenly and do not separate out easily after being mixed. And heterogeneous mixtures are 2 substances that do not mix together evenly. So now that we know these 2 definitions, which mixture do you think is a homogeneous mixture? The oil and water or the sugar and water?
The sugar and water.
So you said the sugar and water was a homogeneous mixture because it mixed evenly, and you're correct. So what does that mean that the heterogeneous mixture is?
One that doesn't mix evenly?
Right, so that one was our oil and water. Can you think of any examples of a heterogeneous mixture in your everyday life?
Salad.
A salad, that's a good idea because it mixes up, but it's not mixed evenly, and it kind of forms layers. So, now we're going to talk about solutions. A solution is a type of homogeneous mixture where one substance dissolves in the other. Was our sugar and water a solution?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because it dissolved. Very good. So now you know that sugar is dissolved in a liquid. It is a solution.
Solution.
So is this a physical or chemical property that something is able to dissolve?
Physical.
Good. So when a substance dissolves, it doesn't react, and so it doesn't undergo a chemical change. It can still be separated out or recovered by, say, evaporating. So let's look at the final column on our worksheet again. I want you to turn and talk with your groups and discuss each of the substances we saw today when we added water to them and determine whether they were homogeneous or heterogeneous mixtures. Okay, so we're going to walk around now and make sure everybody is able to do this with their groups. All Alright, it looks like everybody's about finished. Let's look back at our vocabulary sheet really quick. So on here you'll see two different pictures. These pictures can help us out when we're trying to determine if something's homogeneous or heterogeneous. So looking at this picture on your left where the two substances have formed layers, is this a homogeneous solution or a heterogeneous solution?
Heterogeneous solution.
It's a heterogeneous solution. So this one is like the oil and water. What about the solution on the right where those two substances are mixed evenly? Is that homogeneous or heterogeneous?
Homogeneous.
Homogeneous. So this is just like our sugar and water. So let's look at our final column again. Which ones made a homogeneous mixture?
The sugar.
The snow and salt. The instant snow and salt.
Very good. And which layers were heterogeneous?
The magic sand, the pepper, and regular sand. They did not mix evenly.
Exactly. So these materials have different physical properties that allow them to respond differently when we add them to water. Both the snow and salt were homogeneous mixtures, but are they both solutions?
No.
So why isn't the magic snow a solution? Did it dissolve?
No.
No. So let's look at our question of the day again. Our question of the day said, can we identify substances in a mixture? Or how can we identify substances in a mixture? So turn and talk with your group and come up with an answer for that. I'm going to call on someone randomly to answer for us. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about that with your group. All right, well, can someone answer that for us? Yes.
Mixtures can maintain the physical properties of each substance, which allows us to identify them.
Great. So we learned today how we can use the physical properties of a substance to help us identify them. Now I need all the technicians to put all your materials back in the middle of your table, and Mr. Mason's going to come around and pick them up. Now as a teacher, if you notice that students are messing with their materials while you're trying to teach, you can always take them up before this point. Okay, so that was the end of the explain. Now we're going to move into the elaborate. The elaborate is kind of there as a time cushion. If your lesson is going to last a lot longer than you expect, it is perfectly okay to skip over the elaborate. The elaborate is something that connects the lesson to something that the students are already kind of familiar with in everyday life. All right, now Mr. Mason is going to come teach our elaborate for us.
All right, so now we're going to be passing out a small sample that was also in the package with all the vials. This sample consists of two layers that got mixed up together. So, does anybody have an idea of how we can separate these? Yeah?
A filter.
Yeah, you could use a filter, but it appears that these substances are about the same size. So, what about a magnet? How could we use a magnet to separate out the layers? Yeah?
If one of the layer is metal, then they would attract the metal piece to the magnet and leave whatever is not behind.
Okay. So yeah, but not all metals are magnetics. But if the metal in here, if there is a metal in here and it's magnetic, then yeah, we could use a magnet and separate out the magnetic material from the non-magnetic material. So technicians, I want you to come up and you're going to be grabbing the sample with the two layers mixed together and a magnet. And at your tables, I want you to run the magnet on the sample and see if one of the materials is magnetic or not. So that way we can determine if they can be separated with a magnet. Alright, so now that everybody has their materials, everybody run your magnet along the bottom of the dish and see what happens, and write down your observations in your journal. Alright, so as you run the magnet on the bottom of the petri dish, you'll see that some of the material is in fact magnetic. Alright. So how could this be helpful to scientists who need to separate a mixture?
If they can't filter it, they can use a magnet to separate it?
Right. Magnetism is a physical property of a substance. So what are some other physical properties of this mixture?
It's brown and then black, and I can't really smell it because it's covered in plastic.
Right, okay, good. So these are great examples of physical properties. So turn and talk to your partner and answer this question. How could we separate out this mixture if we added water? So take a second to do that, and I'm going to pick on a random person, and you're going to answer this question for me. All right, so how can we separate out this mixture if we add water? You
can use a filter for the water.
Yeah,
and maybe a magnet for the iron.
Good. So a filter would separate out the material from the water, and then a magnet would separate out the material from each other. All right, so what physical properties would allow you to separate out these substances?
Magnetism, maybe the size of the material.
Okay, good. So the differences in physical properties of substances in a mixture can be used to help separate them out. The two substances in the Petri dish mixture are iron and sand. Iron is magnetic and sand is not. Therefore, a magnet separates the two when you place it near the mixture. Some mixtures, like homogeneous mixtures, are harder to separate. One way to separate some mixtures, like salt and water mixture, is to boil the salt water. When you boil the salt water, the water evaporates out, but the salt stays at the bottom of the container. Are there other methods you know that scientists might use to separate mixtures, like salt and water?
A filter?
Yeah, you could use a filter, but the salt particles within the water are so small that they actually will go through the filter. So what else would you use?
Heat.
Yeah, you could use heat like
evaporate it.
Yeah, evaporate it. So you could just let the mixture sit out, and eventually the water will be evaporated out and leave the salt in the container. So we have determined how to identify substances of a mixture as a group of scientists. It is also important that scientists make reports and write down what they have done for the day. So now we will give you an opportunity for you to show us what you know. So Miss Sarah is going to be walking around handing out the Show Us What You Know worksheet, and it will have 4 questions for you to answer for us. So remember, this is also an important part of being a scientist. So if we have time after this, we can go over our journal prompt, which is, how would you separate each substance in a mixture containing water, rocks, salt, and paper clips?
Alright, so with the evaluation, if you don't have time to stay and finish the evaluation with your class, you can leave it for your host teacher to collect. Otherwise, you should go over it as a class. So you'd need to go over the questions on the quiz or the Show Us What You Know and make sure all the students understand. And finally, the journal prompt is there as a final little time cushion. If you have time for it, then definitely have the class write on it. And they should write on it by themselves. They usually don't discuss it with their table. And the whole Show Us What You Know section should be done individually. So that was the mystery package lesson.